from the Newsmax studio in New York City, here is Steve Malzberg.
All right, folks, welcome back. And joining us now is, well, you know her, you watch her on the Fox Business Network all the time, Elizabeth MacDonald, and she is the author of a great new book, which has been in the top 10 overall on Amazon and has now reached #1 in 3 different Amazon categories, Skirting Heresy, The Life and Times of Margery Kempe. And Elizabeth, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
It's a pleasure. I want to get to the book, which is fascinating, and there are such parallels to what happened then and today's world in which we live. But let's talk a little bit about today's world and what's going on with Russia and, of course, with Israel and Hamas. I know that the markets were way down earlier today and began to rebound. How is what's going on, you know, with Russia and the plane being shot down and what's going on with Israel and Hamas? How is that bound to affect the world economy, if at all?
Yeah, well, I think that what we're hearing from Wall Street experts is that really it's Hamas and the Gaza Strip, the potential to spill over and have broader implications for the Middle East. Russia, Ukraine seems like a circumscribed crisis. What we're hearing is not much market reaction to what's going on with the Ukraine. Yes, the president has sanctions. They are limited sanctions. There's always the option to extend those sanctions further beyond the 17 companies and possibly into the banking finance sectors. No indication that the president is going to move in that direction. But when you think about Russia, its economy is about the size of Brazil or France. It's not even in the top 15 U.S. trading partners in the world. It has junk bond status. So Russia really needs the rest of the world in terms of how it's going to survive as an economy. It has been problematic for some time. Yes, it's an oil and gas issue for Russia, but whether or not the U.S. economy or the other economies around the world will be hurt by Russia doesn't seem like that's where it's headed right now.
Yeah, and Russia's ability to hurt us. I mean, there are all kinds of wacko theories out there. I know that Russia has said that possibly they will nix our arms deal with Iran, but that certainly isn't going to hurt us economically. Are they capable of hurting us economically?
Yeah, sure. Hurting us behind the scenes with the play with Iran. I'm not an expert there. Certainly they could put pressure on it when you talk to experts, but it's really an oil and gas issue because Russia does command so much power in the oil and gas markets with its own reserves. And
what's the likelihood that we could cripple them by directing people countries that use them away? I mean, if we were to do our fracking and to utilize our natural resources, I don't know how soon, but eventually we could provide those nations that need it instead of getting it from Russia. But that would take time, right?
That's an interesting question. I mean, in other words, U.S. oil and gas is the production is on the rise. The question is about Europe. Europe does rely heavily on Russia, and you wonder whether or not Europe can instead turn more toward U.S. oil and gas exports. Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about the book. And I know two people. One person here on the staff has been reading it, and the other one is saying, "Give me the book when you're finished." And I said, "Go to Amazon and buy it yourself." No, but talk about so Margery Kempe. Who was Margery Kempe?
I just got back from book tour in England and Scotland. Not many people in England know about Margery Kempe.
Are your arms tired, by the way?
Say that again?
Are your arms tired? You just flew back from England.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I couldn't resist.
There you go. Right. Margery Kempe, what always fascinated me, I always wanted to know what was going on in England before Joan of Arc was executed. We're coming up on the 600th anniversary of the death of Joan of Arc. And so it's really a period that people don't really understand and know a lot about. So Margery Kempe is the first English autobiographer in the English language. She wrote dictated her memoirs. They were dictated in Middle English. She lived during the most tumultuous time in England, I would have to say. It is probably England's darkest period. For the very first time, England enacted its first death penalty for heresy, for differences of religious opinion. So we're talking about not just the Great Papal Schism or the Black Death or the Peasants' Revolt, where there was a taxpayer revolt, much like we've seen today, where people back then were saying, you know what, we don't want to pay taxes, have people as young as teenagers paying taxes. This was a time of deep divide across the deepest splits and gullies in England's history. And what happened in England helps, I think, set the stage for Joan of Arc's execution. They passed a death penalty for heresy. They also passed a censorship law. Catholic priests were being burned alive at the stake. stake, along with Margery Kempe's own parish priests. So when you see what was going on back then, I mean, to my mind, people often think of medieval people as Martians, as if they're from another planet.
Right.
They are us. They are just like us, but they went through the similar issues back then and handled it and got out of it.
Well, talk about what you, first of all, this is a historical novel, obviously.
Yeah.
But she did what she wasn't supposed to do, and she paid a price for it over and over.
That's exactly right. Margery Kempe was a powerful daughter of a powerful mayor of one of England's most important trading ports. It's Bishop's Lynn. It's on the northeast part of England. It's near Downton Abbey country. Her father was a member of Parliament, so she was a mother of 14 children. She said she had visions of talking to not just Jesus and the Blessed Mother, but some of the apostles, major saints, and also Lucifer. So when people look at Margery's memoirs, they tend to stop reading her memoirs because they think, oh, she's a lunatic, right? What I did was I read her memoirs like I do newspaper stories. I started to read them backwards. I've read them half a dozen times since the 90s. And what struck me was that when you read them backwards, you see more interesting, colorful medieval voices popping out. They sound very modern and very hilarious, too. It reads like Chaucer's Canterbury Tales in the back end. You see things like people saying to Margery, you know, why are you still crying over Jesus' death, Margery? He's long dead. Even his own mother never cried as much as you, Margery. We should have left you in the middle of the harbor in a bottomless boat, Margery. So Margery kept repeatedly getting kicked out. And by the way, she made an astonishing number of pilgrimages. She went not just to, to Germany. She went to Rome. She went to Jerusalem. She went all around the world by herself, often with only her maid in tow to accompany her. So, but to my mind, I think what I'm pushing back on with British academics, they have savaged Margery to this day. They treat her like this vainglorious scold with always God in her mind's eye, applauding her from behind. When you read her memoirs backwards, like I do New York Times stories, because journalists who write front page stories, they often bury the best stuff in the back end. Margery's memoirs reads like a motion for the defense in the front end. She's always defending herself, to be sure, because she's done the unthinkable for a woman of that time. She talked about the Gospels when it was criminally against the law to do so. She lectured people about Scripture. She chastised people for being vain or being pompous or for swearing. So, and she wore virginal white when she was the mother of 14 children. So to my mind, I wanted to write an historical narrative that just immersed, an immersive tale that put people back in that time and place.
And you talk about the parallels, and we were them, they were us, and look at what's going on now. It's been going on all over the world, mostly, of course, in the Middle East and parts of Africa for quite some time. Yeah. To the silence of the media and to this administration, and that's the killing of Christians. Now you have the Christians in Mosul and in Iraq being told either get out or convert at the threat of death. Yeah,
there's terrible persecution of Christians around the world. Now, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think with Margery, what I am arguing for, and I feel like I'm on a quest for this, because I think Margery is the patron saint of gossip. The Catholic Church does not have a patron saint of gossip. They've got patron saints for all sorts of things, for backaches, for comedians, for taxi drivers, you name it. There is no patron saint of gossip when you think of it. When you think of it, Jesus himself was vilified by gossip. So, Margery said, I want to be gossiped about. I want to be slandered. I want to be impugned, because she wanted to. The medieval minds said to themselves, we want to go through purgatory here on earth. So I think we have discovered the patron saint of gossip waiting in the wings since 1934, when her memoirs were discovered in a library in Lancashire, England. But getting back to your other point about how, that era, 14th century, 13th, 14th century England, and that period, sort of there were parallels to today. Yes, back then they had a credit bubble bursting. They had a real estate collapse. They had a severe economic crisis, sort of similar to what we have today. They had a credit shortage. So to my mind, there are so many illuminating and enlightening parallels, not to bowdlerize reality and make it any less, from what's happening today, but there's striking similarities to what is happening now versus what happened back then.
Maybe Obama should look back and see how they got out of it, because I don't think he's going to get us
The poll tax didn't work.
No.
Right.
One more. So you described a little bit about how you read the articles over and over the years, but what drew you to her originally?
The gripping humanity of Margery's story. In other words, back in the mid-90s, I'm pretty geeky. I'm a self-confessed geek. I like to read these kinds of things. But what drew me to Margery's story was the fact that when I read what has been written about her, she has been to this day repeatedly attacked, even by modern day academics. They don't understand what Margery is saying because they read her, they look at her memoirs from front to start to finish. And when you break up her memoirs, as I've done, it is fascinating when you, to see the true Margery really does step off of her memoirs and off of those pages. And I felt like she was has been asking somebody just to write the story as it happened and what she endured and how she. I hope to. I was honored to write.
Well, it certainly is a roaring success and continued success with it. And great to have you in studio.
Sure.
Thanks for coming in. Of course, Elizabeth MacDonald, editor of Fox Business Network, and the book is Skirting Heresy: The Life and Times of Margery Kempe. And if you weren't intrigued at the beginning, you certainly should be intrigued by now. All right, folks, thank you. And when we come back, it's going to be Give Me Five, one final time for the day. You know it, you love it, you got to have it, and it's only here on the Steve Malzberg Show, and that is only on Newsmax Television. Don't go away.